It started with a locked door. Jessica had never locked our bedroom door before. Not once in the 8 years we lived together. Not when she was changing, not when she was crying, not even when she was mad at me. But that night, as I walked down the hall with my phone charger in hand, I heard the soft click of the lock sliding into place. I stopped. "Jess?" I knocked lightly. No answer. I wasn't even suspicious at first, just confused. I twisted the knob out of habit. Locked. "Hey, I left my charger in there. Can you open up?" Silence. Then, shuffling. Barely audible, like someone moving quickly but trying not to make a sound. My stomach tightened. That sound, it wasn't just Jessica moving around. There was weight to it, an extra presence, the unmistakable shift of more than one body in a room. I stepped back. My brain scrambled for excuses. Maybe she was wrapping gifts? Maybe she was watching something embarrassing? Maybe then I saw it. A shadow moved beneath the door. Not hers. Hers was standing still. This one was longer, stretched out like someone taller shifting their weight from foot to foot. I felt my heart hammer against my ribs. My mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at me to kick the door down, to find out who the hell was in my bedroom with my wife. Instead, I inhaled slowly, forced the anger down and walked away. Not because I was weak, because I was about to play a bigger game. Jessica thought she was careful. She wasn't. I went straight to my office, grabbed my laptop, and pulled up the security camera footage from the front door. I had installed the cameras last year when a neighbor's car got stolen. Jessica had laughed at me, said I was paranoid. Now, paranoia was about to pay off. I fast-forwarded through the last few hours. Jessica had come home at 6:12 p.m. Alone. At least that's how it looked. But then, at 6:47, the camera caught something. A man. Tall, dark hoodie, moving fast. He slipped inside before the door even fully opened. Like he'd done it before. Like he knew how to move through my home unnoticed. I sat back in my chair, a cold numbness spreading through me. Jessica was in my bedroom right now with him. I could have stormed in. I could have broken down the door, dragged him out by the collar, and watched the color drain from her face as she realized she was caught. But no, she wanted to be sneaky. I'd show her real sneaky. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and started securing my accounts. Every shared fund? Locked. My investments? Moved. My savings? Secured. If she was planning something, she wasn't getting a single dime of what was mine. Then, I sat back and waited. 1 hour later, the door finally unlocked. I listened as soft footsteps crept down the hall. Then the faint click of the front door shutting again. Jessica didn't know I knew. But soon, she would. The next morning, Jessica acted like nothing had happened. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, flipping pancakes like a 1950s housewife, smiling at me like she hadn't just locked me out of my own bedroom with another man inside. "Morning, babe," she chirped, setting a plate in front of me. "I made your favorite." I stared at her. I wanted to laugh. My favorite? Jessica hadn't made me breakfast in months. And now, after last night, she thought some half-burnt pancakes were going to smooth things over? I sat down, watching her, studying. She was too bright, too eager. She wanted to distract me. I cut into the pancake, took a bite, and kept my expression neutral. "Sleep well?" Jessica hesitated, just for a second. If I hadn't been looking for it, I might have missed it. "Yeah," she said, a little too cheerfully. "You?" I let the silence drag, just enough to make her uncomfortable. "Not really. I came to grab my charger last night, but the door was locked." Her hand stiffened around the spatula. "Oh," she let out a breathy laugh. "Yeah, I was trying on outfits and didn't want you to see the mess." "Sorry, babe." A flawless lie. Too flawless. I set my fork down. "Did you hear me knock?" Her eyes flicked to mine, just for a second, before she smiled again. I think I was in the bathroom, or maybe blow-drying my hair. You know how loud that gets. She was good, but not good enough. I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head. "So, if I check the camera footage, it'll just show you trying on clothes?" Jessica's face didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. A split-second calculation. She knew I had cameras. She knew I checked them, but she didn't know if I had checked last night. Her fingers curled against the counter. "You don't trust me?" I almost laughed. The audacity. The sheer audacity. Before I could answer, she did something that almost made me lose it. She walked over, straddled my lap, and cupped my face in her hands. Like she actually thought I'd forget. Like she thought she could seduce the suspicion out of me. Her lips were inches from mine. "I love you, baby," she whispered. "Why would I ever lie to you?" Unbelievable. I stared into her eyes, pretending to hesitate, letting her think she had the upper hand. Then I smiled. "You're right," I murmured. "I trust you completely." She grinned and kissed me, slow and sweet. She had no idea. No idea that last night, while she was busy sneaking around, I had secured every single cent of my savings. No idea that I had already called a lawyer, just to see where I stood if she was planning to leave. No idea that, by the time she made her next move, I'd be 3 steps ahead. Jessica thought she was playing me, but the real game, it had just begun. By the time I left for work, I had a plan. I wasn't going to confront Jessica. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she would go, how long she would lie to my face. But she made her first mistake that same afternoon. I came home early. Not on purpose. It was just one of those rare days when my boss let us out a few hours ahead of schedule. I pulled into the driveway at 3:45 p.m. instead of my usual 6 p.m. Jessica's car was there. But as I got out, I noticed something strange. The blinds in our bedroom window were shut. Jessica never shut the blinds during the day. She loved natural light, always had them open, always complained when I forgot and left them closed. I felt my pulse quicken. I walked up to the front door and, instead of unlocking it right away, I knocked. Silence. Then, after a few seconds, hurried footsteps. The door swung open. Jessica stood there, breathless, like she'd run to answer. She was still wearing her silk robe. Another detail that didn't add up. She only wore that robe when she was either getting out of the shower or when she was entertaining me. She blinked in surprise. "Babe, you're home early." I glanced past her into the house. The air smelled faintly of cologne. Not mine. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning. The living room was clean, too clean, like she had just rushed to straighten everything. "Yeah," I said casually. "Slow day at work." Jessica laughed, a little too high-pitched. "That's great. I was just, taking a nap." I nodded. "In your robe?" She froze, just for a second. Then, she forced a smile. I got cold. I started walking toward the bedroom. She followed too quickly, her footsteps too eager. She was trying to steer me away from something. I pushed the door open. The bed was made. But there, on the nightstand, was the evidence she hadn't had time to hide. A tube of red lipstick. Jessica never wore red lipstick. Ever. She always said it didn't suit her. I picked it up, turning it in my fingers. "This yours?" I asked. Jessica's face drained of color. Yeah. I bought it today. Thought I'd try something new." I stared at her. She was unraveling. Jessica was a fantastic liar when she was in control. But she wasn't in control anymore. I twisted the cap off and smirked. "Strange," I mused. "It's worn down like it's been used. But if you just bought it, shouldn't it be brand new?" Her breath hitched. I watched her flounder for an answer, her mouth opening and closing, her hands fidgeting. Then she made her second mistake. She snatched the lipstick out of my hands, shoved it into the nightstand drawer, and forced a laugh. "Why are you being so weird? It's just lipstick." I smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "Right," I said. "Just lipstick." She relaxed, thinking she'd dodged a bullet. But she had no idea. I had already seen the footprints in the carpet near the closet, larger than mine. And I wasn't leaving the house until I found out who they belonged to. I knew. She knew I knew. Jessica was unraveling right in front of me, but I stayed calm. I watched her fidget, her fingers tapping against her robe, her eyes darting toward the bedroom door, as if she couldn't wait to get me out of there. Too bad. I wasn't going anywhere. I glanced down at the carpet again. The footprints were fresh, too big to be mine. Whoever had been in here had left in a hurry, and judging by Jessica's sudden panic, they hadn't left through the front door. That only left one option. I turned my head slowly toward the closet. Jessica must have sensed where my thoughts were going, because she suddenly grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Babe, let's go out for dinner." My treat. Desperate. Rushed. I didn't answer. I just took a step toward the closet. Jessica yanked harder. Seriously, I was thinking about that steak place you love. Doesn't that sound good? I ignored her, my hand wrapped around the closet handle. Jessica lunged. Don't, she blurted out. Too loud, too fast. I froze. She never told me not to open something in our own house. We locked eyes, and then I yanked the closet door open. For a second, I thought it was empty. But then, in the dim light, I saw it. A pair of men's shoes sticking out from behind my winter coats. Jessica let out a shaky breath behind me. I reached in, grabbed the coats, and ripped them aside. There he was, some pathetic, sweaty-looking guy, crouched against the back wall like a trapped rat. Mid-30s, brown hair, terrified eyes, wearing a half-unbuttoned shirt. My fists clenched. The air turned electric. Jessica squeaked. Actually squeaked like a guilty child. The guy looked up at me, swallowed hard, and before I could say anything, he lifted his hands and stammered the worst thing he possibly could have said. Bro, it's not what it looks like. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Jessica gasped like I'd lost my mind. Baby, please, let me explain. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at the man hiding in my closet. And I had only one question. How stupid do you think I am? The room felt like it had been yanked into slow motion. Jessica stood frozen beside me. Her robe clutched tight like she could somehow cover up the mess she'd made. And the man in my closet? He was still crouched there, eyes darting between me and the door like a cornered cockroach trying to figure out which way to scurry. I stepped forward. He scrambled to his feet so fast he almost tripped over his own shoelaces. Look, man, he stammered, hand still raised like I had a weapon pointed at him. I didn't know she was married. That made me laugh. Loudly. Jessica winced. Oh, you didn't know? I repeated, tilting my head. So what? You thought you were sneaking into some random woman's house for fun? The guy blinked, his mouth opening and closing like he was buffering. Jessica snapped. Mark, shut up. She shrieked at him. You're making it worse. Oh, so now we had a name. Mark. Jessica's hands flew to her hair as she spun toward me, her eyes wide, pleading. Fake. Everything about her was fake. Baby, please let's talk about this. I can explain. I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes locked on Mark, letting the silence hang thick between us. Mark's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. He reeked of panic. I took another step forward. Mark flinched. Look, man. I swear, I was just leaving. You should have left before you stepped foot into my house. Jessica made a strangled noise. Michael, please, don't do anything stupid. I slowly turned to look at her. Stupid? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Like, I don't know, bringing another man into our bedroom and shoving him in the closet like a dirty little secret? Jessica's lip trembled. I made a mistake. I smiled. A slow, cold smile. Yeah, I said, nodding. You did. Then I stepped back and gestured toward the door. Get out, I told Mark. Before I changed my mind. He bolted. Practically tripped over his own feet as he shoved past Jessica, sprinting down the hall like the house was on fire. The front door slammed a second later, and then it was just me and her. Jessica's hands were shaking. Baby, I don't. She flinched. I walked to the dresser, opened the top drawer, and grabbed my keys. Then I turned back to her, completely calm. You think you're smart, Jessica? I asked, voice quiet. Dangerous. She swallowed hard. Michael, I cut her off again. I knew, I said, stepping closer. I knew before you even locked the bedroom door last night. I knew before you shoved your little side piece into our closet like a coward. I knew a month ago. Her mouth fell open. What? I let that sink in. Let her brain catch up to the fact that she hadn't been the one playing the game. I had. Then I delivered the final blow. I secured my savings, I told her. A month ago. Before you even filed. Jessica's face drained of color. She looked like she had been punched in the stomach. Like she couldn't breathe. Before I filed? She croaked. I smiled again. Oh. She thought she still had control. Not anymore. Jessica swayed on her feet like I had just ripped the floor out from under her. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I just watched. Silent. Waiting. She blinked rapidly, shaking her head as if she could physically undo what I had just said. Michael, what do you mean, before I filed? I tilted my head. Exactly what I said. I took a slow step forward. I knew you were planning to leave me, so I made sure that when you did, you wouldn't be leaving with a single dime of mine. Jessica collapsed onto the bed. Not dramatically, just like her knees had finally given out under the weight of her own stupidity. You, she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. You knew? I nodded. She sucked in a sharp breath. Then, out of nowhere, she laughed. A weak, breathy, hysterical little laugh. I don't believe you, she muttered, shaking her head, her hands gripping the sheets. You're bluffing. You're just trying to scare me. I didn't say a word. Instead, I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, and then turned the screen toward her. Jessica's eyes dropped, and just like that, the final spark of fight died in her face. She saw the new account, the transfers, the locked investments, the fact that every shared fund was empty. The color drained from her skin. You, her voice shook. You took everything? I smiled. No, Jessica. I took back what was mine. She snapped. You can't do this. She shrieked, lunging to her feet. I'm your wife. That money belongs to both of us. I chuckled, actually chuckled. Is that how it works? I said, crossing my arms. Because I'm pretty sure the second you let another man into our bed, you stopped being my wife. Jessica sputtered. You don't understand. I wasn't actually going to leave you, I held up a finger. Lie to someone else, Jessica. Her mouth snapped shut. And then, for the first time since this entire thing started, she actually looked afraid. Because now, she had nothing. No money, no escape plan, no cushy little divorce where she walked away with half. Nothing. I stepped back, flipping my keys in my hand. I'll be at a hotel tonight, I said, voice calm. You have until tomorrow to pack your things and get out of my house. Jessica gasped. Your house. This is our house. I grinned. Check the deed, sweetheart. Your name's not on it. Her face crumpled. And that was the moment she realized she had truly, completely lost. Jessica stood there, frozen, as if her brain had short-circuited. I watched her face cycle through a million emotions. Shock, panic, rage, but beneath all of it, fear. This wasn't how it was supposed to go for her. She was supposed to be the one walking away with everything. She thought she had played the perfect game, but she wasn't even playing on my level. And now, she was about to lose everything. Michael, she whispered, her voice suddenly soft, pleading. Baby, please, don't do this. I smiled, not out of kindness, out of amusement. Here it was, the last act. Jessica wasn't stupid. She knew anger wouldn't work. She knew threats wouldn't work. So now, she was trying to break out the crocodile tears. Do what exactly? I asked, tilting my head. Hold you accountable? She took a step toward me, her hands reaching for my arm. I let her touch me. I wanted to see how far she would take this. I messed up, she whispered, her eyes shining. Fake tears. So predictable. I wasn't thinking, Michael, I love you. I was just confused. I laughed. Jessica flinched. You love me? I repeated, shaking my head. That's hilarious. Michael, I do. She insisted, gripping my wrist. That guy, Mark, he meant nothing. It was just a stupid mistake. A midlife crisis. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, I leaned in just enough to let her think I was listening. You think I'm stupid? I asked softly. She froze. The fake tears stopped. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I leaned back, shaking my head. Jessica, I don't care what excuses you come up with. I don't care what little story you try to spin. You lost. And you lost before you even knew you were playing. Jessica's breathing turned shallow. Her fingers curled against my wrist, desperate. But I have nowhere to go, she whispered. I smiled. Not my problem. She let out a shaky breath. And then, the mask finally slipped. Her grip on my wrist tightened. Her face twisted, her eyes narrowing into something cold. You think you've won? She hissed. You think you're so much smarter than me? I smiled wider. Jessica, I know I'm smarter than you. Her jaw clenched. Then, she slapped me. Hard. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. I barely blinked. Jessica, breathing heavily, waiting for my reaction. I just tilted my head, calm as ever. You done? She screamed in frustration, shoving me backward. Her face twisted in a mix of fury and absolute defeat. I didn't even react. I just watched her fall apart. Then, I turned, grabbed my keys and walked to the door, completely unfazed. You have until tomorrow to get out, I reminded her, my voice calm. Don't be here when I come back. And with that, I walked out. Jessica was still screaming when the door slammed behind me. I didn't go to a hotel. I parked a few blocks away, sat in my car, and just breathed. My hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. I wasn't angry anymore, because it was over. Jessica lost. She was probably still in there, pacing, crying, punching the air, whatever people like her did when they realized they weren't as smart as they thought they were. But me, I was calm. I had won. After about an hour, I finally drove off. Not to some sad hotel room, but to my brother's place. Ethan. He had always hated Jessica. Told me she was bad news from the beginning. I should have listened. When he opened the door and saw me standing there with an overnight bag, he didn't even ask. Just stepped aside and let me in. She finally did it. Huh? He muttered as I dropped my bag on his couch. I let out a breath. Yeah. He went to the fridge, grabbed 2 beers, and tossed me one. She take you for much? I grinned. Not a cent. Ethan laughed. Damn. Cold-blooded. I love it. I popped the cap off my beer and took a sip. I should have felt what? Sad? Betrayed? But all I felt was relief. Ethan sat down, shaking his head. You know she's gonna try something, right? I smirked. Let her. Because I was ready. And I wasn't done with Jessica yet. I woke up to 22 missed calls. Jessica. I stared at my phone, my mind instantly sharp, calculating. I wasn't surprised. Of course she wasn't going to go quietly. Women like her never do. I let the phone buzz again. Then, just to amuse myself, I answered. Jessica, I said, my voice calm. You're calling a lot. Miss me already? There was silence on the other end. Then a sniffle. Oh, so that's the angle she was going for. Michael. Her voice was soft, broken. I don't know what to do. I had a shaky breath. I need you. I almost laughed. That's so? I said, leaning back on Ethan's couch. Because I seem to remember you needing someone else not too long ago. Michael, please. She sobbed. Fake. Forced. I had known her too long to believe any of this. I stayed silent, letting her drown in the act she was performing. And then she played her card. I think I might be pregnant. I actually laughed out loud. Couldn't help it. Wow, I said, wiping a non-existent tear from my eye. That's the best you've got? Jessica gasped like she was offended. I'm serious. I took a test. It was positive. I wouldn't lie about this. I smirked. Jessica, let me ask you something. She hesitated. What? If that's true, I said slowly, letting the trap close in around her. Then tell me, who's the father? Silence. A thick, heavy, devastating silence. I could almost see the gears in her head turning, the panic setting in, the realization that she had walked straight into a trap of her own making. You really should have thought that one through, I added, voice dripping with amusement. I mean, come on, Jessica. Do you expect me to believe you got knocked up by your husband when you've been sneaking men into our bedroom? Jessica sputtered. Michael, you're my husband. Of course it's yours. I grinned. Oh, don't worry, I said, mocking. I'd be thrilled to take a paternity test. Jessica's breath hitched. There it was. She had lost again. Or, I continued, twisting the knife, you can save yourself the embarrassment and admit you just pulled that lie out of your ass. Another pause. Then the real Jessica came out. You're a piece of garbage, Michael. She shrieked. I gave you the best years of my life. And this is how you treat me. I pulled the phone away from my ear as she screamed. Ethan, across the room, raised an eyebrow. That her? I nodded, putting her on speaker so he could hear. You think you can just leave me with nothing? Jessica shrieked, her voice completely unhinged now. You're gonna regret this. I'll make sure of it. I chuckled. You already lost, Jessica, I said simply. But by all means, keep digging. Then I hung up. Ethan let out a long whistle. Wow, she's losing her mind. I smirked. Yep. And the best part? She still hadn't hit rock bottom. Jessica had lost. But she didn't know she had lost. Not completely. She thought she could still hurt me. Thought she could scream, manipulate, guilt-trip her way back into control. But control? That was mine now. I gave her until noon the next day to get out of my house. I had no intention of seeing her again. I wanted to walk back into my home and never hear her voice in it again. But of course, Jessica didn't listen. At 12:07 p.m., I pulled into the driveway, expecting to find her gone. Instead, Jessica was still there. Her car was parked out front, the trunk wide open, but she wasn't loading anything. She was just standing on the porch, arms crossed, smirking, like she thought she had something left to fight with. I exhaled slowly, patient, calm. Then I stepped out of the car. "You're late," I said. She tilted her head, that smug little expression still on her face. I decided I'm not leaving. I laughed, actually laughed. Jessica's smirk faltered. She didn't like that reaction. She wanted me angry. I walked up the steps, stopping just inches away. "Jessica," I said, lowering my voice, dangerous. "This house is mine. Every cent in our account, mine. Every investment, mine. I gave you a deadline to pack up your things and leave because I was feeling generous." Her smirk finally dropped. "You think you can just—" "I don't think, Jessica. I know." I pulled my phone out of my pocket, tapped the screen, and held it up. Jessica's face drained of color, because she saw exactly what I wanted her to see. A message from my lawyer. Paperwork. Eviction notice. I had filed it first thing that morning. "You're officially trespassing," I said, tucking my phone away. "And if you're still here in 1 hour?" I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I'll have the cops drag you out." Jessica's mouth fell open. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected me to be 10 steps ahead. "You wouldn't," she breathed. I grinned. "Try me." She stared at me, hating me. But behind all that anger, she was afraid. Because this was it. The final blow. The game was over. Jessica lost. For a second, I thought she might try one last trick. A final scream. A final insult. A final desperate attempt to make me feel something for her. But she knew. There was nothing left. So instead, she let out a shaky breath, turned toward her car, and slammed the trunk shut. And then, she left. No words. No tears. Just a bitter, silent retreat. I watched her drive away, a weight lifting off my chest as her car disappeared down the street. And then, I stepped back inside my home. The place felt different. Cleaner. Quieter. Like a storm had finally passed, leaving behind clear skies. I poured myself a drink, sat down on my couch, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt free. Checkmate, Jessica.